Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Hi, this is Kathleen Wells, host of the Naked Truth Report, and I'm here at FAIR's Immigration Reform's Hold Your Feet to the Fire event. And I'm delighted to be here, and I'm joined by Richard Valdemar, who is a transnational gang expert. He retired from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in 2004, where he served most of his 33 years in his fight against gang and gang violence. He's an internationally recognized expert in both traditional and non-traditional gangs. Richard, what is a non-traditional gang?
Well, that would be like the Stoners, some punk groups, the Goths. Those are non-traditional gangs.
Oh, I never heard of a non-traditional gang. Are they large in numbers?
Yes, at certain times, like remember there were party crews and tagger crews. Those are non-traditional gangs. Oh. And so they eventually evolved into traditional gangs.
Oh, wow. So Richard is originally from Los Angeles, from Compton, in fact.
Willowbrook,
and that's why when I went over the list of people to interview, I said I definitely have to have him on here because he's an expert on the Los Angeles gang story. Tell us about it.
Well, it actually started in 1909 when the first gang that we can call a gang in Los Angeles is the Alpine Street Gang, which is now part of Chinatown. But we had 1911, the White Fence Gang, and we have 1940s, the whole Pachuco era. So we have a long history. In fact, Los Angeles is called the mother of all gangs.
Why is that?
Because so many of the gangs, although they're in other parts of the country, they came from Los Angeles.
Really? Why is that, though? What about Los Angeles? See, I thought Los Angeles was the city of the angels. So why did she become the mother of gangs? How did that happen?
Well, it had a lot to do with the Pachuco era. We had Texans migrating from Texas to California, and at that time they had what was known as the Texas Tip. The first gang we really know about is the El Paso Tip, EPT from El Paso. And they're responsible for the Pachuco style that we saw in Los Angeles in the 40s. But in Los Angeles, they did not want to be part of the Texas clique, so they started their own clique, and they used the letter M and the number 13 to designate Los Angeles gang members. This is all in Hispanic, although it's in the Hispanic communities that this happened. It drifted over into the black community and the Asian community as well, and white community as well. So most of the gangs from Southern California have that same structure, that Pachuco structure that started in the 40s. In fact, I always say the first gang fighter that I ever saw was Mighty Mouse. If you ever saw a Mighty Mouse cartoon, Mighty Mouse is fighting the Pachucos and rescuing Perline Pureheart, his girlfriend, from the gangs.
Oh my God! This is a history. How did you get involved? How did you know all this history? Because this is something I don't know anything about.
Well,
how did you learn this history?
Well, first of all, I grew up in Compton, so you get to know people. A lot of my friends were gang members, but my mother and father also, as a cautionary tale, would tell me stories about the Pachucos. Now, my father fought in the Pachuco riots. But he wasn't one of the Pachucos. He was one of the soldiers and sailors that fought against the Pachucos.
Well, now, when was this Pachuco?
This is 1943.
In Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles. So the Pachuco riots occurred, and now, of course, they're depicted as some kind of racial event. Well, my father's Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And what did he fight against? He fought against people like his brother, who were members of these Pachuco gangs. And Pachucoism represented a rejection of American culture. They were against the war. They dressed in those outlandish clothes because it was forbidden at that time, because all the cloth was rationed, to have wide lapels and big baggy pants and all the bright colors. It was the opposite of a military uniform, which is well cut, small lapels, and bell bottoms.
You're not talking about the zoot suits, are you?
Yes, that's the zoot suit riots.
Oh, really? So you mean there's a gang affiliation associated with zoot suits?
Absolutely, they were all gang members.
Oh, see, I didn't realize that. They try to like romanticize it in the media.
Absolutely.
You're
And
informing me.
it's all about they'll call it a racial thing, that the big mean white soldiers and sailors beat up on the poor minorities.
Right.
Well, no, my father didn't go to beat up Hispanics because he was white. He was a Hispanic, and he was against the people that were fighting against the war effort. In the 1940s, everybody was pro-war. We were trying to save ourselves from the Japanese and the
Right,
Germans,
right.
except this small group of dissidents, and many of them eventually joined the military and changed their whole demeanor. But at the time, they were the outlaws. They were kids who who were too young to join the military, even though my uncles all joined when they were 16 and 15 years old. But they were too young to join the military, or they had a criminal history, or they had mental problems. So they were not allowed in the military. So what did they do? They were rat packs. That's what they called them. Rat packs, and my grandmother used to call them marihuanos. Don't hang around with those marihuanos.
Those suit wearing marijuanos.
Yeah, smokers.
Marijuana. And this is you're informing me about, and my listeners, about something I didn't know.
Yes, because if you go to college, they'll tell you that other story.
They romanticize
They
it.
romanticize the whole thing and how innocent these poor guys were. Well, no, they weren't. When the soldiers and sailors would go out on pass, and they couldn't go out in a group, they would go out one or two at a time. They would go to a nightclub with their girlfriend, and they would get beat up by pachucos. And pachucos would strip them of their clothes because they represented the United States military, and do something to their girlfriends. Well, you do that to a Marine, guess what happens? You get in a fight, and the Marines defended themselves well, and they came back with uniforms all cut up and beat up. So the military kept asking the Los Angeles Police Department and the Sheriff's Department to do something about it. And we had the worst police department we ever had. If you ever want to see what kind of police we had in those days, because where were all the able-bodied men?
In the war.
In the war. They weren't at home. So we had not a real good, Chinatown tells a story about the corruption in Los Angeles. Anyway, so they couldn't do anything about the Pachuco gang, so finally the military said, well, we'll do something. So they released all these soldiers and sailors at the same time and told them, anybody in those monkey suits, they're fair game. So they go, and there was abuses, because some of the soldiers try to pay back what had been happening to them, like the rape of the girls, the cutting up of their clothing, and all that type of stuff. And then the military had to come in and intervene, finally, in Los Angeles. So that's way back in history, but gangs have evolved since then, much more sophisticated, more dangerous, with alliances with the prison gangs and with the Mexican cartels.
Oh, really? So talk to me about this alignment with the Mexican cartels.
Okay. The gangs got so big that they became international. So what would happen is Los Angeles would export its gang members to other states, and somebody would say, well, you're getting in trouble in Los Angeles, so you have to go to Oregon, because you stay with your aunt up there in Oregon. Well, they go up to Oregon, and guess what they do? They continue to do their gang stuff, continue to go to the drug houses and dress the same, and so eventually they would recruit Oregon kids into their gang. So it spread across the United States. Some gangs got so big, like the big three, 18th Street, Mar Salvatrucha, MS-13, and Florence. And those gangs got so big that they became...
so MS-13 originated in...
Absolutely. Born and bred in Los Angeles, California.
And then it went to El Salvador?
Well, what happened is we deported some of them. They went back to El Salvador, started the gang in El Salvador.
Oh, my God. See, I always thought they originated in El Salvador.
Everybody says
they
that.
always say the El Salvadorian gang MS-13.
Yeah, but their manners, their everything, their dress, all this stuff imitates Hispanic gangs from Los Angeles. And they call themselves sureños. That means Southern gang members. That means Southern California gang members, and that means an alliance to the Mexican mafia prison gang.
And what is their intent? What is their purpose?
They're counterculture, right? So our culture to them is foreign, and they have rules and regulations and leaders, but they don't accept ours. And this is all street gangs, not just Mar Salvatrucha.
Right.
So
The Bloods and the Crips, right?
Exactly the same. They have rules and regulations and things they have to go by in leadership, and they follow those rules and not our rules. So they can't snitch. They can't use our system to get justice. They have to use their system, and their system involves retaliation, intimidation, terrorism. And so these are the things that are going on in the community. And so we say, oh, we're going to get an ex-gang member, and we're going to go down there and we're going to start a gang program, and that's going to stop gang violence. Having an ex-gang member leading your anti-gang program is like having Cheech and Chong tell your kids about the evils of marijuana. It doesn't work. You know, you need a successful person like yourself, myself, who's come back and said, hey, 90% of the kids I knew never joined a gang. By only a very small percentage of them, but they're responsible for almost all the crime in the community.
Right.
So this is the thing we fight against. You know, Grandma was right. Marihuanos, don't hang around with them.
Well, would you say gangs are like the mafia? You know, they're Italian gangs and Jewish gangs at the turn of the century.
Of course. They're in Los Angeles, we imitated those same things.
And
except
the Irish gangs.
Our immigrants happen to be Hispanic and Japanese.
Right.
Okay, because we also had the Yakuza.
Yeah.
And they settled in California as well, and we have the second generation, and, you know, we have Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese gangs, all with a foothold in L.A.
They're sort of like the rejects or something. I don't know. Maybe not, because when I think of the mafia, I think of them as being very financially successful, maybe I should say, but not long term.
Yeah, I would say socially they're retarded. You know, they can't function in our society. And I would go to schools and try to do these programs to try to keep kids out of gangs. And there'd always be some hard kid that would not cooperate with me and would sit in class and say things and all. So I would do the thing that gang members fear the most.
Right.
I would call them to the front of the class and ask them to read from a book. And no gang member would ever do that because they're socially inept. They have to invent their own system of socialism so that they can survive, because they can't function in ours. That's where we need to bridge the gap. We have to tell them, this society that we're in is inclusive. You can come in here and you're embarrassed at first because you can't read or because you're awkward, but we'll help you through that. Don't be bullied into joining a gang.
So is there kind of an association between illegal aliens and gangs? Do you see some kind of affiliation there?
Yes, because the gangs started from immigrant populations. The new immigrants coming in tended to join these gangs or imitate them. So we have that, and we have our own domestic gang problem. We can say, Native Californians in the United States, have their lifestyle, but then we keep feeding it with more and more illegal aliens. So it wound up the gangs control the drug, human trafficking, and what we call in Los Angeles Mica mills. If you come into the country without paperwork, first thing you need is a driver's license, a social security number, and some kind of immigration paperwork. Well, guess who makes that? They make it, and they learn from the Chinese immigrants, and so the Hispanics all buy their stuff down. If you ever go down,
Alvarado.
Exactly,
yes.
and you'll see a gang member stand there making a C with his finger, and it's not because he's a Crip, it's because he's telling you this
card.
Yeah, card, identification card. Counterfeit cards are for sale here for $50.
So it's the gangs that make that.
Yes, and they tax it. So even if you're not a gang member and you happen to be making false identification, you're going to be taxed by the local gang. So Mara Salvatrucha and 18th Street are largely the ones taxing that. But in the Florence district, it's going to be Florence that taxes those people.
Because I even hear that, like, on Skid Row, which is now many blocks. When I was growing up, it was just a few, but it's like 20 or 30 blocks.
Oh, yeah.
But I hear those folks living down on Skid Row are charged to put their tent up
The
by
rent.
the gangs.
Yes, the gang charge them rent.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
That's that's counterculture, antisocial,
Right.
sociopathic.
Yeah, I joined a gang because I want to fight for Hispanic, my race, and then I'm going to tax the homeless and victimize the local community. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Illogical.
Because it's not part of our culture to be a gang member. It's not part of the black culture. It's not part of the Asian culture. It's not part of the Hispanic culture.
It's not part of humanity.
That's right.
But humans do want to, their tribal, clannish, stick together with their group. They have a necessity to do that.
Like the Boys and Girls Club. There's
that's a good one. Yeah.
Boy Scouts of America. Join the Army and become an airborne ranger.
Right.
That's the positive
way of being clannish.
Exactly.
Denzel Washington was just at a Boys and he's a product of the Boys and Girls Club.
I know it. I read the article. It's great because I support the Boys and Girls Club everywhere I go.
Yeah. So whether it's positive way is Boys and Girls Club, negative is gangs. The Bloods and the Crips. In fact, I've interviewed some of those guys. I used to be a liberal. I had the Democratic show, the Kathleen Wells show, the liberal show. And I interviewed Malik Spellman and Melvin Farmer. They were former Crips.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in mostly Blood, but we did have the Mona Park Crips. Mm-hmm. But those areas, and then I got sent to Compton, and that was mostly all Crips. And I got to know quite a few. But even before the Crips, there was Slauson Village, there was the Gladiators, there was all these bartenders. These are all black gangs. In those days, they wore silk jackets from out of the Korean War with the dragon on the back, and then they would have their name embroidered on it. And they have lowrider cars. We still kept the lowrider cars and some of the dress.
So those lowriders were gang members?
Yeah. What would happen was
how naive I am.
Nobody could afford to buy a car themselves. I'm talking about teenagers, right? And so what they would do is build a car. So they would go to the junkyards and buy pieces of cars. Sometimes they'd steal them. But it was a community project so that by the time the car was done, it was the gang car, because it was owned by all of them. So a lot of these gangs started out around car clubs or groups that are stealing cars and making new cars.
Because I saw a special on PBS about the lowriders. They romanticize it.
Of course.
And they say, because I watch everything and I try to stay informed, and they say like, oh, this is just our culture, and this is our style, and it's just and they're beautiful cars. They are beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Yeah, they put a lot of investment into making these cars so special. And they used to drive up and down Crenshaw Boulevard,
right.
In fact, you still have folks driving up and down Crenshaw Boulevard. Yeah. Are those gang members too?
Not all of them. Some of the car club members and, that type of thing. But if you look at them and you listen to them talk, they all have adopted that gang style. And even my son went to Santa Cruz. He's a graduate of college. But when I talk to him, I feel like I'm talking to an inmate in the jail.
Really?
Because he picks up all that hip-hop talk.
How old is he?
He's 40-something years old.
He's 40-something and still talking hip-hop?
Yeah, because, hey, I'm proud that I was from Compton or Long Beach or whatever.
I don't think so. Is he married?
No. Then probably that's why. I always tell the women, you know how to stop gangs? Stop dating them.
Get a wife. Because she's not going to go for unless she's in a gang,
Yeah, but the culture in the United States has adopted this. We love bandits, we love outlaws, we love counterculture people.
That Hollywood stuff portrays it. It even starts with Jesse James and
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and what is the woman, Bonnie and Clyde?
Yes, Bonnie and Clyde, the 30s and the 40s.
They romanticize that.
You've seen it through our history. So I used to tell I had a class of all female officers, and I said, the reason that we have gangs is because you guys love them.
Right.
And you don't like good guys. Good guys don't have a chance. So then they said, no, that's not true. They got all mad. So I said, okay, here we'll do this imaginary comparison. We're going to put Fonzie from Happy Days here.
Yeah, he was in a gang.
And we'll put Urkel over here. Right. How many would date Urkel? And not one girl raised her hand.
Well, Urkel was the nerd.
Exactly.
I mean, but there's a big difference between being a nice guy and being a nerd, right?
But what's wrong? But what's wrong with being a nerd? You can be a nerd. But what about the other guy? Is Fonzie liable to be true to his wife?
No, he was cool though. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Didn't he have a thing for? Didn't he have a thing? I don't remember. Did he have a thing for one of the women?
Yeah, he supposedly had a girlfriend. But what I'm saying is, he's not the type that would be loyal to somebody for the rest of their life.
Right.
He's likely to use drugs and alcohol. What kind of job does he have? He's a mechanic.
Right.
Okay, so he'd probably work in a factory that Urkel owns.
Right.
But Urkel's not cool, so we won't date him. We'll date Fonz.
Right. Okay, and you expressed that to the women that were cadets?
Yes.
Okay. So you were also in the military policeman before you joined the LA.
Yes, I never would have been like you. I came from the left. Okay, I was a community activist, organizer, and ran a teen center in Willowbrook for troubled kids under the War on Poverty and the Catholic Youth Organization. And Dr. Julian Nava was my mentor, and he sent me to Puerto Rico in 1965. And I went to a Spanish-speaking conference there. And when I was at the conference, I found that the translators from America were cleaning up, politically correcting whatever speeches these people from South America and Central America were saying. So I said, hey, that's not what he said. He talked about your mother. I told the truth to the American-speaking, English-speaking people. So they wound up all surrounding me so I could do a proper translation of what they were saying. And they hate us. They hated us, okay? This is, 70s and 80s. There's all the revolutions going on.
Because they're communists, Che Guevara and all that
yes,
stuff.
exactly.
They hate capitalism.
They hate capitalism, and they think we're responsible for every bad thing that ever happened to them. And, this...
That's what you learn. These academicians, they lie. In fact, I have on my Facebook page, what's his name? Latino professor, Ramos. No, what's his name? Acuna. Acuna. Have you heard of him?
No.
Oh, okay. But he's a famous Latino professor. He's retired now, but he's a socialist, basically. They hate capitalism.
Yes, they do.
And, black academicians are the same way. But there's no example of a successful socialist society.
No, there isn't.
So how can they be smart?
Well, why do we have Angela Davis as one of our the tenured college professor? That's crazy. She's in Santa Cruz. Or why do we have Ron Kalenga, the inventor of Kwanzaa?
Yeah, I had him as a professor.
And he's a murderer.
I know.
And a torturer.
And a wife beater.
And a wife beater.
And a philanderer. In fact, he has more than one. He has a harem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
From the US organization, backed by the Chinese.
Oh, my gosh.
And, and they were at war with the Black Panthers at the time.
I was so disappointed. Everything's gotten so distorted.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
History revisionist. They rewrite history and they take all the parts they don't want out of it.
Oh my gosh, why? This is human nature. She's flawed. Yeah. And that's what, and this is the good thing. I keep going back and forth. This is the thing. Conservatives understand that human nature is flawed.
Exactly.
And so they operate accordingly.
Our wonderful founders, they built in the triple sections of check and balance into our system so that because we knew there was going to be humans who were flawed, so the other parts of the government could check them. But we're not doing that anymore.
Right, but yet Democrats are like, they don't believe in human nature, or they think human nature has the potential for perfection.
Everybody's good.
Or aspiration.
Right.
Or like everybody's good.
Just because I want to be good doesn't mean I am.
Right, and they act like poor people are more ethical.
Yeah.
And we know that's not true.
No. Well, they're not any less ethical, but we're all flawed.
We're all flawed, yeah.
Yeah, so I love kids. I love, I was a Boy Scout leader and I ran a teen center and I'm the youth minister for, my church and all that kind of stuff because I love them. I don't want to see them dead on the street.
Right.
And that's what happens. There's no good end to this. You're either in prison or you're dead in the street.
Right.
And then their bosses, they all think they're, I'm not going to study. I don't have to study. I'm smart, I don't have to dress the way you want me to. I don't have to follow rules. Well, guess what? When you get arrested, you go to prison, you follow rules. Because the Black Gorilla family will not let you dress any way you want.
Right. In prison, and it's so funny how in prison these hardcore guys end up so how do I want to put it? It's like you're such against the culture, you're such against following rules, and then you go to prison, that's all you do is follow rules.
Right.
You're so limited.
They have more rules in prison by the
Right.
prison gang than we make for them while they're in prison.
It's the irony.
Yes, and then you can't talk to your white friends. You can't do this. You can't do that. You will go to class. You will write these papers. They make you write papers. They make you study history. It might not be the true history, but it's the history that they want you to hear, and they use your ethnic pride against you to make you think that everybody's against us, and you're okay because you are of this minority group, and we're with you. But they're not.
I know. Well, you and I are on the same page, and we have the same background. I may be a little younger, just a little, but I grew up in Lamert Park. I told you that. So, I know that whole area, Crenshaw and everything, and so we know of where we speak, right?
Yes.
But you taught me quite a bit about the 40s, that I didn't zoot suits, and the origination of the gang culture in Los Angeles being the mother of all gangs. This is something I didn't know, so I appreciate you sharing that information with me, Richard.
Thank you, Kathleen, and I appreciate what you do because, like we know, the real truth is not out there unless somebody like you puts it out. That's why the Naked Truth is a great name for your program.
The Naked Truth Report. I'm following in the footsteps of Terry Anderson. I don't know if you know him, but he had a program at this same station. So in the 90s. So I'm following in his footsteps, and I'm pretty courageous. I tell it straight, like Trump. That's why I like straight talkers.
Yes.
That's why I like Trump.
Me too.
Yeah, I tell it straight.
I wasn't for him. I wanted to vote for Cruz, but
oh, you did.
But then when Trump came along, I said, well, he's like the doctor that tells you need to exercise and do,
Right.
stop eating so many sweets and this. You don't want to hear that, but that's the truth,
right?
And you need to follow it.
I like the truth. I don't like it soft pedal. Just give it to me straight.
Right.
With no chaser.
Excellent way to say it. Yes.
Okay, is there something else you'd like to add?
Well, I was going to mention Maxine Waters. We have a long history. The Sheriff's Department used to set up surveillances on her house because every subversive radical in the world would come and meet her or have their meetings at Maxine Waters' house. How she survived after all the different controversies and stuff that have followed her. I did the health survey for Martin Luther King Hospital. I walked the streets of Watts and talked to people about what we needed to build the Martin Luther King. But then it became Killer King, right? And she protected the corruption that was millions and millions of dollars being corrupted out of that program.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah.
She's just maintaining her career.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see her now and then. I saw her at One United Bank on Crenshaw, and I just couldn't even say anything. Normally, because I interviewed her when I was a liberal.
Yeah.
I used to do interviews my interviews of the politicians are on the Huffington Post. You can Google my name, Kathleen Wells Maxine Wall. You see that interview.
Yeah.
But that's when I was a Democrat, a liberal, even a progressive. I'm not anymore. So when I saw her, I just couldn't even look at her. I'm just so disappointed because they have betrayed the community.
My hero was Dr. Julian Nava, the father of bilingual education. And what did he do? All of a sudden he took off and he went to go find the city of Atlantis. And he believed he found it off the coast of Florida. But you know why he wanted to find the city? Because he believes that the Hispanics were genetically evolved from those superior people in Atlantis, like we were supermen.
Yeah, but they believe these theories.
Exactly.
They all have theories. Oh, the professor's name is Rudy Acuna, Acuna.
Well, I think I have heard of Rudy.
Yeah, he teaches out at Cal State LA.
Yeah.
He's on my Facebook page, but he's such a socialist.
Well,
he just hates Trump. All he does is talks about him. He said, "Oh, that idiot, that dummy, that racist, that's all he says."
Well,
and there's a professor. He can't articulate better than that. Yeah.
James Diego Vigil. Vigil. James Diego Vigil. He's a socialist. I used to not a socialist. He's a social anthropologist, and he used to team teach with me. And he's a little, left of me, and but he's a great guy, and he knows that once you get into this higher, sophisticated crime level, I don't touch that. That's your Richard. You take care of that Mexican mafia and cartels and all that. Yeah, but he did a great book called The Projects, and it's all about life in the projects and how kids turn to gangs in the projects.
So the illegal aliens, because they're not supposed to be working when they come to America.
Yeah, but they all do. And they get that driver's license and that fake Social Security card, and they go to work, and whatever work they do, unless they're gang members don't work. The wife or the girlfriend works.
Really?
Yeah, and then they live off their money.
Really? But don't they make money being a gang member?
They make some money, but they usually keep it for themselves, or they have to donate a certain amount of it in tax. About a third of their income goes to taxation.
From the gang?
The gang. It's extortion, really.
What a turnoff, huh?
Yeah.
How regressive, I think, right?
Yes, I would say regressive, exactly.
Yeah,
it's like a primitive life form that prehistoric men did or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, Maxine Waters is a big disappointment. Let's hope that President Trump is able to get his... You see, they're trying to stop him every way they can with Pelosi instituting this impeachment inquiry, as if they haven't been inquiring for the last couple of years to impeach.
Yeah, well, I was trained in the Saul Alinsky rules for radicals method, so I know that what you do is you create a diversion over here, so they can see that you're not doing any legislation, you're not passing any bills, you're not, you're only taking care of the friends you have.
Right.
So that's what they're doing, political theater to get your eyes off what's actually happening, the border, drugs, gangs, all that stuff, terrorism. That's where we should be focused.
Right. That's the Americans' interest.
Yes.
Exactly.
For all of us, not just the rich.
For all of us. Exactly. Right. We're Americans.
Exactly.
That's why I love this American First narrative, this meme.
Right.
I'm all for it. Well, I want to thank you, Richard, for joining me on the Naked Truth Report. And you be sure to check us out on your YouTube channel and see my archive shows, and get the AM 870 app on your smartphone.
I will.
Okay, thank you.
It's a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for doing what you do.
I'm trying. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, this is Kathleen Wells, host of the Naked Truth Report. I'm here at FAIRS, Federation of Immigration Reform, their Radio Row event here in D.C. And now I'm delighted to have Jessica Vaughan, who's Director of Policy Studies for the Center of Immigration Studies. You Truth Warriors out there know that that Steve Camarada is a frequent guest on the Naked Truth Report. And now we have Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, how are you? Glad to be with you.
Yeah, you were telling me about, first let's step back a minute, and why don't you tell me what your job is exactly as Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies, Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
So I cover the operational side of the immigration issue. We try to cover the whole waterfront, from refugees to national security. And my colleague, Steve Camarada, he analyzes the fiscal costs and the labor market impacts using census data mostly. I was a State Department official, and so I covered the way immigration policy is implemented, like how our visa systems run. Immigration enforcement is in my portfolio. So kind of the practical side of it.
So give us the update. What's going on with it?
Well, immigration, what we're seeing a lot of now is an effort to restore some integrity to our immigration system. First of all, of course, trying to control illegal immigration more and bring that under control, but also to make sure that the people that we are admitting as legal immigrants or who are coming in on visas are actually qualified and not committing fraud to get these coveted green cards and visas, to make it fair for people. We want to have an immigration system, but we don't want people to get it through misrepresentation because, bad things happen. In California for, the San Bernardino terrorists, he himself was affiliated with a terror group and brought in a fiance that if they had paid more attention, they would have seen there were a lot of red flags in her visa application that should have been detected, but were not, because they were pretty much rubber stamping a lot of these applications. And some of the associates working with them were committing marriage fraud to get green cards for illegal aliens. And
something that Ilhan Omar may have committed.
there are a lot of really good questions being asked about that, and I think that there are some things that need to be looked into with respect. But, the fraud in our legal immigration system is one of the things that there's not enough attention paid to that. And, like I said, it's always there whenever we have these high-profile cases and investigators start looking under rocks. They always find marriage fraud. It's come up recently in the discussions about guest workers, because under the Trump administration, we hear all these stories like, oh, these highly skilled guest workers coming in. We need, to have our employers have access to them. But now that they're actually investigating the applications, they're finding all kinds of stuff going on. Recently, they decided to start visiting the companies that were asking for visa workers and going to their sites. They found 36% of the applications were fraudulent.
I'm not surprised to hear this.
Anybody who knows people
Right.
who are affected by this is not.
But this is just like human nature. Human nature will cheat to get over. They're about getting over. That's human nature.
Yeah, and it's like if we look the other way, of course, there's going to be more people trying to get away with it.
Because they want to get over and get their thing going.
Right.
That's just
Who
human
wouldn't?
nature.
It's opportunistic.
That's just human, exactly. And that's what liberals and Democrats don't realize. The left doesn't understand human nature. I always say that. I think conservatives understand human nature.
It's the same is true of this crisis at the border.
Right.
There's, people have heard that if they show up at the border with their child in tow and say that they fear return, that they're
Right.
going to be released into the country and that no one's ever going to come looking for them.
Right.
Who wouldn't do that if you lived in El Salvador?
Right. Because they don't show up for their hearings even. I think it's something like, So what does the
But
data...
that shows us that because if we understand human nature and why they're doing it, we can do something about it. We change our policies.
Right. But I think conservatives understand human nature, and that's why they have the policies that they do. Not because they're mean-spirited. It's understanding human nature and understanding and knowing world history, how humans have interacted in the world. But so what does the data tell us? What do the numbers look like for this year in terms of all the things that you're monitoring, the numbers? How do they look?
Well, starting with the border numbers, those are much more encouraging. Since May, the number of people arriving to cross illegally seems to be down about 60% from what my sources at the Border Patrol tell me. That's really promising. It's still bad.
Some
but
say it's because of the weather. It's low when it's hot, the hot months anyway.
I heard that, but the decrease is much more than we would see on an annual basis because of the weather. It's much more profound than that. Now, granted, it couldn't get much worse than it was in May as far as numbers. And so, down from, disastrous proportions to merely very serious proportions is not enough. But it is, we're gone in the right direction. We've turned a corner. On the legal immigration side, the numbers are not so much affected because there are so many people in the world who are in line for these visas and green cards that weeding out the fraud doesn't really change the numbers, but it does, I think, it's something we have to do anyway just for the integrity of our legal immigration system. And what needs to happen there to bring that into control, I think, is to cut back some of the categories that there's really no justification for anymore, like allowing people to bring in their brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews.
That's chain migration?
Yes, exactly, which is like more than 60% of our immigration system. There's no logical reason for that. If there ever was, there certainly isn't now. And our employment-based immigration system right now is rewarding the companies that are bringing in visa contract workers and using them to replace Americans who once had those jobs. that needs to be changed to evaluate the immigrants themselves and what their qualifications are, how likely they are going to be self-sufficient and successful, and who want to become Americans. That's the system we need to try to implement there. And if we make all these changes, it means that the numbers will be lower. And that's a good thing for our modern economy also.
Well, we've gotten away, the whole Immigration Act, I always say this on my radio show, the Immigration Act of 1965 was a big mistake.
Oh, it was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
Totally unintended.
And brought to us by Democrats. Unintended consequences.
Although I think some of them maybe had an inkling of what it might produce, but they sold it to everyone as...
It won't change the demographic.
Yeah, and of course they're not held accountable for these profound changes. I mean, if you
they're
look
profound.
If you look at the history of immigration to our country at a graph, which I've used in some of my presentations, you see it goes up and down and up and down. But since the 1960s, we've been in a period of time where it is only going up. Only up. This is a massive social experiment.
And it's
we have
unsustainable.
undertaken. Right. And nobody voted on it except for members of Congress. Certainly the people of our country never decided to
Well,
do that.
the American people have been betrayed. Don't you think?
I do think so.
By the Democrats. We got to never put them in office again.
Yeah. Well,
never. Look what they're doing now.
They're bringing in the next set of voters that they hope will keep them in office. I mean, that's really what it boils down to for some of them.
Yeah, that's the bottom line, and it's a fight, actually, for the culture of America, for the fabric of America. And you see now what they're doing they're determined to impeach Trump or whatever. I don't know what Pelosi is doing, but they've been inquiring about impeachment from day one.
I'm not sure what that means, an impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
I think she wants to have the impeachment word in there, but have it not be actually trying to have it both ways.
Right, because you're supposed to file articles of impeachment.
Yeah.
So it's like this big to-do over nothing. Or what's that Shakespearean, all sound and fury signifying nothing?
That really nails it.
I know, and I went over to the museum yesterday and I took a photograph of all the headlines from the states, and they're like all about impeachment, and it's a no-brainer because it's null and void. It's nothing.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction, and it's a waste. And it's like, how can you use the American people this way? How can you be so disingenuous?
Well, they're paying the price by losing their influence over people because people are tuning out. And, it's not surprising to me at all that eventually they would lose credibility. But it's a shame.
It's a shame. In fact, who's testifying now is the director of National Intelligence, the guy, I can't remember his name. He's testifying now in front of Congress. Adam Schiff is making this as like the second coming of Jesus Christ or something.
Well, what they should be paying attention to is the testimony of former ICE director Tom Homan, and he's sitting side by Sheriff Chuck Jenkins from Maryland, and behind them is going to be a row of angel families who've been permanently separated from their loved ones because of crimes committed against their families by people who shouldn't have been here to begin with, by illegal aliens. And it's about how much we need Congress to step up and give money for the mission of immigration enforcement that they refuse to do, because that's where all these legislative battles are playing out right now. It's over the spending bills, because they can't get any other types of bills through. Mm-hmm. They have to do the spending bills, and so that's where the battles happen. And the House Democrats especially do not want to give any funding to have our laws enforced, which is really most of what needs to be done.
It's so un-American.
What's un-American is to ignore this problem that affects so many Americans. And to think that you can have a functioning legal immigration system without enforcing the rules.
All of Latin America will be in the United States if the Democrats had their way.
I think they would prefer those voters to the voters they have.
Right. And this is the thing, because Los Angeles, I always say Los Angeles is like Tijuana revisited.
Well, this is one reason why there was such a fuss about Trump's efforts to find out where citizens live.
Right.
The Democrats knew why they had to stop that, because there are so many, particularly in the Los Angeles area, members of Congress who represent very few actual citizen voters. But our system of creating these districts for representatives in Congress is based on total population, whether or not that population is even eligible to vote. And there are quite a few Democrats who don't want people to know that. And if we actually divided our districts according to the number of voters, representation in Congress would be very, very different. And parts of the country that are, where literally their vote is worth less because of that.
And in fact, I interviewed Tom Tancredo yesterday, and he was telling me a story about how Tom DeLay was saying, "You son of a gun, you better change your attitude or you won't be able to have a career in politics." So what we're real...
As if that was all that life was worth living for.
Yeah, exactly. The be all end all, And Tom Tancredo, I thought they were here to help the American people,
or at least represent their voters.
And we're not here to, they're not. I thought, but they're here. It's clear when you think about people like Maxine Waters and Al Green that they're only sustaining their career because they're not fighting for the interest of. And I've confronted these folks. And they just deny. They deny. I confronted Al Sharpton at the Congressional Black Caucus Legislative Council about how illegal aliens are adversely impacting Black America. And I said, the data is clear. He said, there is no such data.
That he wants to see. You got to catch them when they think nobody's looking, and then you hear why they're doing it, which is for their own
career, and my pocketbook. Oh, they say that?
Oh, yeah, off the record, when they don't think they're being recorded or on video, they'll explain it. There have been Democrats in Congress say it openly that I need to do this for the votes.
Oh,
and there are others who do it, I think, because of the old patronage model of politics, where it's I'm just taking care of my people.
But they're not taking care of their people.
They're not taking care of necessarily of Americans.
Not black politicians, because black politicians have been sustained by Black Americans, and Black Americans are markedly losing.
Yeah, this is more the Chicago model of like the my people kind of thing that motivates them.
Yeah, I think
the spoils system.
And I do think things are different. Geographically, the regions. Yes. Like, I think the South is a little different. Blacks in the South have a different experience and outlook overview than those in the urban cities like Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think
the Democrats
that's true.
Liberals have clearly in Los Angeles been detrimental to Black America in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco.
Well, and in South Carolina, where I live, unfortunately, legacy of Reconstruction there, where they had legitimate political representation and then had it taken from them, really by racism.
Right.
Has to be in their minds.
Right.
And
right. So it's regional.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then it all just comes together being for Democrats, but therefore we have to at least split it or something. I don't know. But, Candace Owens was saying that this is the last election, 2020 is the last election where the black vote will even be relevant. Because
I think
and
she's right.
I love
to
the
listen to her.
demographics. You know what I mean? You know the change that is happening demographically.
Yeah, I think this, and part of it has to do with concentrations of people as well. But it's a social experiment.
And we're in the petri dish.
Yeah.
But we'll be a footnote Black Americans will be a footnote in American history.
Oh, don't say that.
But it's the way things are going, We just don't have the numbers. We abort all our kids, mass incarcerate the men, and the guys go to the Oscars wearing a dress.
People are talking about pronouns.
Right. There's 66 genders. I mean, it's doomsday. Black America, footnoted, okay?
Well, it doesn't have to be that way.
I really appreciate you coming in, Jessica Vaughan. She is the Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies.
Thank you.